Thank you, Mr. Deputy Clerk, and good evening and welcome to the Council Budget Meeting for Wednesday, January 10th, 2024. My name is Councilor Carlos Garcia, and I'll be chairing your meeting tonight because I'm the chair of the Budget Standing Committee. Please rise for the playing of the National Anthem and a moment of reflection.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Carton s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Please be seated. First, I will look to Councilor McPherson to read the land acknowledgement.
The land on which council meets today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishbek peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many Indigenous peoples made up of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. The Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement should remind us of our responsibility to ensure the Dish, the territories on which we live and work, is never emptied, and that we take care of the land and its inhabitants in a way that ensures its future sustainability.
Just for the benefit of those in attendance online for this meeting, we also have Councillor Phillips, Councillor Dodge, Councillor Miller, Councillor Lindell, and Councillor Townsend, and Councillor Harris as well.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Clerk. So number one on the agenda is the chair's report. So I just wanted to share with everybody, tonight's meeting is an opportunity for the public to provide comments on the 2024-2026 capital, waste and wastewater, or water and wastewater, and operating budgets. Please keep in mind this evening there will not be a discussion of budget amendments and no decisions will be made. Amendments to the budget as brought forward by councilors will be discussed and considered at meetings scheduled for January 22nd and January 31st. Now, there are a number of delegates registered to speak this evening. Comments from delegates are a vital part of the council process. However, as a reminder for those in attendance, please be aware that according to our procedural bylaw, clapping, applauding, and outbursts from the gallery are not permitted during the meeting. Thank you. Adoption of the agendas, Deputy Clerk?
There are no amendments to the agenda, and there are no additional items of correspondence.
Okay. Can I have a councilor make a motion to adopt the agenda? Councilor Stevens, a seconder. Councilor Williamson. All in favor, a show of hands. That's carried. Adoption of minutes, there are none. The minutes from the meeting of November 22nd, 2023 were approved by council at the December 11th, 2023 council meeting. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest from councilors? Seeing none, just a reminder, if anybody has any, that the councilors are required to submit written statements of declarations of interest via an online form. Number 5 is motion to move consent reports, and there are no consent reports. So a declaration to all presenters. We have a number of presenters this evening. So council chambers in all municipalities in our country represent the seed of local democracy. The many acts that govern us understand the necessity of the collective voice when decisions are being made to grow our spaces, pass our bylaws, and to seek opinions into very complex issues, ensuring safe spaces for all in our public discourse. We recognize the right of the majority to decide, the minority to be heard, the public to have an opportunity to participate, and all participants to be treated with courtesy and respect. It is imperative that elected officials, citizens, and staff have input, and it is paramount that we listen to one another and question one another, but that we understand we do this in a way that never undermines any person's ability or their dignity in our chambers. We respect the right for everyone to have an opinion and remind the audience the views of the public do not always reflect those of the corporation of the city of St. Catharines. We will move to number 7, which is discussion reports, and 7.1 is Legal and Clerk Services, Office of the City Clerk, procedural information and public engagement for the 2024 budget process. So I now call upon Kristen Sullivan, Clerk of the City of St. Catharines, to provide a presentation regarding the procedural information and public engagement for the 2024 budget process.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia. As I think most people in this room might remember, in 2023, the province extended strong mayor powers to St. Catharines. Today, I'm going to go over how this new legislation impacts the city's budget process. This presentation is a condensed version of the report and presentation that Council received in September. To ensure everyone's on the same page, when I use the term budget or budgets, I'm referring to the operating budget, the capital budget, and the water and wastewater budget. Back when staff was looking at what implementation looks like here in St. Catharines, we mirrored some of our past practices, but also built upon recent improvements, such as when in 2020, we moved to including all of council in budget discussions. I want to provide a reminder that neither staff nor the mayor brought in these changes. They were a provincial legislation decision. So keep that in mind when listening to the presentation and asking any questions. Many of the provisions in the new legislation provide an opportunity for the mayor to delegate their authority. The language related to the legislation about budget, however, is a shall, not a should or a can, which makes this provision more of a duty or a responsibility. And the mayor must solely exercise this power. There's no delegation authority, unlike some of the other strong mayor powers. In terms of the budget process to date, you'll recall that we extended the process this year so that information is available to the public for longer than in the past. So, beginning of November, council received presentations from the city's ABCs with their draft budgets, and staff's recommended budget has been available since November 16th, which was later subsequently presented to council on the 22nd of November. Between then and mid-December, councilors had the opportunity to sit down with staff to ask questions about their recommendations. And finance staff utilized various engagement opportunities to both inform the public about the process and staff's recommendations, and as well as an opportunity to provide input. The legislation now states that the mayor shall prepare and present a budget prior to February 1st. Further states that the mayor must provide this proposed budget to the members of council and the clerk and make it available to the public. The budget was publicly presented on January 3rd, which was last Wednesday, when the agenda for today's meeting was published. The next step in the timeline is the ability for council to amend the budget. This has always been the next step in the process. Amendments are nothing new, but now the legislation adds timelines. It states that within 30 days of receiving the proposed budget, council may pass resolutions to make amendments. All the timelines I speak about in this presentation are calendar days, so the 30 days runs from January 3rd until February 1st. Annually, council may pass a resolution to shorten that 30-day time period. If council does not amend the budget, then the proposed budget is deemed adopted at the end of that 30 days. Again, so there's no final vote at that time. The budget is just deemed adopted at the end of that timeline. During these 30 days, council budget meetings are scheduled for January 22nd and the 31st. These meetings will focus solely on amendments. The agendas will be available to the public 5 days ahead of time, and amendments are due to staff 2 days before that, so that there's time for us to include them on the agenda. This is similar to the submission and publishing timelines that we've used in the past couple years for budget. Our recent practice was to place a hold meeting in your calendars for the night after budget night, in case the discussions need to extend into a second evening. So a meeting time is held for February 1st, should the January 31st agenda not be completed before curfew. As these meetings are only intended to discuss budget amendments, they will be canceled if councilors don't submit any amendments for the agenda. Similar to the past, each amendment is discussed and considered individually and with its own vote, and amendments only require a simple majority to pass. Amendments do need to be specific enough to identify the item or the budget line and the corresponding amount that would be added or removed from the budget. Again, if no amendments are approved, the budget is deemed adopted as presented on February 1st. The next step in the process is where things look a lot newer. So the legislation now provides that the mayor may veto any budget amendments approved by council. This can happen for up to 10 days after the council amendment period ends. So not 10 days after council approves an amendment, 10 days after the 30-day timeline. So the timeline for the mayor to veto any amendments will run from February 2nd until the 11th. The mayor can shorten this 10-day timeline by providing notice in writing to all the members of council and the clerk, and we would put that available for the public on our website. If the mayor vetoes an amendment, he must do so in writing, indicating what amendment is being vetoed and the reasons for that veto. This, again, is a public document which would be available to the public through our website and will be circulated directly to all members of council. If the mayor vetoes an amendment, the resolution that council approved is deemed to have not been passed by council. If the mayor does not exercise the veto power, the proposed budget is deemed adopted with all of the council-approved amendments on February 11th. Again, in this situation, there's no motion to adopt the budget. It's just deemed adopted at the end of that time period. If the mayor vetoes an amendment, the legislation provides that council can vote to override the veto within 15 days after the time period for the mayor to veto amendments. This would run from February 12th until the 26th. A regular meeting is scheduled for February 26th, at which time council would consider an override. A councilor would need to submit a motion to override the veto to staff by Thursday, February 22nd at noon. That ensures we're able to get that motion on the agenda when we publish for council later that day. 2/3 of the members of council must vote in favor of an override for it to pass. And that's 2/3 of the members of council, not 2/3 of the members that are present at a meeting. So it's different than how things are typically counted. Keeping in mind as well, the mayor is eligible to vote on overrides. If council overrides a veto, the resolution that amended the budget is again deemed to be passed by council, and the budget is deemed to be adopted with that amendment. If council does not override a mayor's veto, then the proposed budget is deemed adopted without that amendment. Focusing on what's immediately in front of council over the next month, if you can only want to take one thing from this presentation, I want it to be the timeline for amendments. There are 2 meetings scheduled for this purpose. So you have January 22nd and January 31st. As a reminder, amendments for January 22nd are due Monday, January 15th at 4 p.m., and amendments are due on January 24th for the January 31st meeting. I highly encourage councilors to reach out to staff as soon as possible if you're considering an amendment. Staff can help identify which budget lines will be impacted and can help identify appropriate amounts and details. Again, these 2 meetings are only scheduled for the purpose of discussing amendments. So if you don't submit any amendments, the meeting would be canceled. These dates are included in today's report, has been emailed out, and they've also set a reminder in your calendars ahead of those dates to pop up and remind you. That concludes my presentation. At this time, I'm happy to take any questions specific to process or procedures.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any questions from council on the clerk's presentation? Councilor Williamson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Madam Clerk. The 2/3 to override the mayor's decision, that's automatically 9. It's not 2/3 of the number of members that are present. It's an automatic 9.
That is correct. The way it's drafted in the legislation is different than how votes are typically drafted, and it would be 2/3 of the members that are on council, not who's present at the meeting.
Okay, and I don't quite, why are we doing, it seems like there's there's 2 layers there at the end, January 15th and 22nd or whatever the meeting, that were the cutoff dates and then the meetings. Why that?
We put 2 meeting dates because we weren't sure how much time we would need for amendments. We had 30 days available to us, so we thought we'll provide 2 dates. If council is able to put all their amendments in that first meeting, then we would not need the second one.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Williamson. Any other questions from councilors, either present or on Zoom? I see Councilor Stevens.
So just a little clarification, because I'm a little confused. What happens if we're not all here? Like tonight, I think we're missing 1, right? There's only 11 of us. So how do we vote to make that 9 work?
So through the chair, 9 people would still have to vote on an override. So if only 9 people are here, all 9 people would have to vote in favor.
Thank you, Councilor Stevens. Interesting question, and both from you and Councilor Williamson. What happens if we only had 8, but there is quorum, but we don't have 9?
Through the chair, to the chair, the motion would fail.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I see Councilor Ratliff. Oh.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. I just read this last week that there were some smaller municipalities that just rejected the strong mayor budget process altogether. Was that an option that was open to us? Or was it like once we signed the housing pledge, we were committed to this process?
So through the chair, strong mayor powers were assigned to St. Catharines prior. There was like basically 3 rounds of municipalities being assigned strong mayor powers. We were assigned July 1st. There was a second group or a third group that was assigned based on whether or not they would sign a house. If they wanted to get strong mayor powers, they could sign a housing pledge and get strong mayor powers along with some funding model that goes with it. We did not have that option.
All right, no, thanks. That's helpful.
Thank you, Councilor Ratliff. I don't see anybody else. May I remind those present and members of the public watching that Ms. Sullivan's presentation is available online. This is a new process, as she explained, because of the strong mayor powers as new legislation. So none of us are totally familiar with it as before. So if you have any concerns or questions about what you just heard, you can look it up at stcatharines.ca. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation to receive the report? Councilor McPherson to move it and Councilor Miller to second. Can I get, okay, I think we need a recorded vote for this, so Mr. Deputy Clerk?
So Councilor McPherson,
Yes.
Councilor Miller,
Yes.
Councilor Phillips,
Yes.
Councilor Ratzlaff,
Yes.
Councilor Stevens,
Yes?
Councilor Townsend,
Yes.
Councilor Williamson,
Yes.
Councilor Dodge,
Yes.
Councilor Harris,
Yes.
Councilor Kushner, Councilor Kushner. He's here, but that's okay. Councilor Lindell,
Yes.
Chair Garcia,
Yes.
and one more time, Councilor Kushner. That's a no. Well, it's still carries, Chair.
So that is carried. Okay, so we will move to 8 presentations, and we have 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3, which is Office of the Mayor Administration. So the mayor will be making a presentation on the 2024 to 2026 multi-year capital budget, water and wastewater budget and associated rates, and operating budget. Before we hear from the mayor, council will now hear delegations. After all the delegations have spoken, there will be one motion to receive all the delegations. A reminder that presenters have 5 minutes to present, and their delegation must pertain to the 2024 to 2026 multi-year capital budget, water and wastewater budget and associated rates, and or the operating budget. And we will be timing the presentation because there are a lot of presenters, so if you get close to that 5-minute mark, we will let you know that the time is coming up. So we will move to delegate number 1, and I will now call on Joel Horner to present. I believe Mr. Horner is here in person. Okay. So just for information, to be ready, so Lindsay Taylor will be delegating next. So if you're not in council chambers, if you're in the overflow room, please make your way to council chambers and identify yourself to the security officer. So all speakers should
Sidewalk.
identify themselves.
I've been here 13, I've been in this wheelchair 13 years. 2 mayors, and the sidewalks are all the same. Can't get on them. But you can't get on them because nobody does corners. I'm sick of this. So I'm on the road. I've been hit twice. And next time I get hit, if I'm still alive, I through the city. Even when they use their plows, they do a terrible job on the street, sidewalks. And I'm challenging every one of you to go in a wheelchair for a day. See what I gotta do when it snows. Agree or what? That's it.
Are you finished, Mr. Horner? Okay, please stay in case there are any questions for you. No? Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Horner? That's okay, there are no questions. Thank you very much. Okay, so I now call on Lindsay Taylor to present. Ms. Taylor? Okay. Okay. Once again, to advise in case the next presenter will be Ron Hughes, in case he's in the overflow room, please make your way to council chambers. Ms. Taylor, go ahead, please.
Good evening, councilors, Mayor Matt Cisco, and esteemed community members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today on the topic of sustainable budget increases and keeping forestry public. In 2012, I came to St. Catharines for my Bachelor of Arts degree at Brock University, working parts of full-time in customer service. I was drawn to the labor studies and psychology programs for their original research, envisioning myself contributing to solving relatable issues faced by everyday working people. Feeling like something was missing, I pursued a diploma in business general and environmental technician training at Niagara College. After completing my postgrad, I am now on the path to becoming a certified ecological practitioner and certified engineering technologist. I'm grateful to the St. Catharines Downtown Association for offering me a good green job as the sustainability director for the Streetscape and Sustainability Department. Through this role, I advocate, activate, and educate on the importance of prioritizing and revitalizing our main streets by leading experiential learning, long-term greening, and placemaking projects. One critical project was our downtown tree report. So in 2022, Rachel Braithwaite, Executive Director for the Downtown Association, asked me one simple question: how do we bring more trees downtown? To answer this, I led a team of 4 with my colleague Sean Parkinson and 2 environmental management assessment interns from Niagara College. We inventoried all street-facing trees in the downtown and drafted a public report. Our report allows us to monetarily appraise the forest value and model the eco-services that trees provide the community. This research has since been presented at 2 international conferences, the International Association for Great Lakes Research in Toronto and the Society for Ecological Restoration Conference in Darwin, Australia, with incredible support from the global community. In fact, Sean and I will be connecting with the Horticultural Department at Durban University in Durban, South Africa, to share our inventorying methodology and explore collaborations for tree equity studies in both communities. Using open source data, QGIS, Excel, and iTree, we found that the majority of our tree stock were smaller, younger trees, many of which were struggling to reach maturity. In technical terms, we had a low population variability, a low standard deviation, and a left-skewed distribution in both years. We accessed Guelph's open source data to compare our significantly different data sets. Guelph's tree stock had a much higher population variability, a higher standard deviation, and a symmetrical distribution. What a healthy urban forest should look like. But achieving such a healthy urban forest takes a significant investment in the planning, preparation, installation, long-term maintenance, and community involvement in urban stewardship. And from the academic literature, we can say with confidence that it is only when trees reach a point of maturation that they provide the community top value. So based on everything we learned throughout this process, we came up with 6 recommendations for the city and downtown. Let me update those listening today on the status of 4 of our recommendations. It takes all sorts of people to realize the sustainable development goals we have aspired to achieve. That is why one of our primary goals was to establish partnerships with a variety of stakeholders, including community members, local environmental organizations, and grassroots groups, and city staff. Many wonderful people have contributed to the success of this research and further greening efforts in the city. Our second recommendation was to reclassify urban street trees as natural assets in alignment with provincial updates to OREG 588-17, which now allows for the inclusion of green infrastructure in the city's asset management plan. I had the pleasure of meeting with Samantha Downing to discuss where the city was at with this process. She provided me with an incredible amount of insight into the climate work that the city is doing and ideas for future research. Thanks to her technical expertise, we'll be looking at building setbacks as part of undergoing a review of our downtown street tree research as we look to submit our report for peer review through the Journal of Restoration Ecology. Our third recommendation was for the adoption of location, biodiversity, and site preparation considerations for tree plantings. Mike Kraft from Community Recreation and Culture Services connected with our team and has used our tree inventory data and tree planting recommendations to bring new trees downtown, 5 of which you may have seen as you cross Market Square. Everyone has expressed interest and excitement in the work that we're doing and what we plan to do in the future. So that brings me to our critical recommendation and why I'm here tonight. In 2022, we originally wanted to see a new GIS technician position become available to support inventorying efforts throughout the city. Since speaking with city staff, workers, leaders in our community, and other municipalities such as Guelph, we reframed our recommendation in 2023 to expand the forestry department more broadly once we became aware of how comparatively our department was understaffed and lacking a diverse staff complement. Other cities are leveraging the intellectual capital and talent of their workforce to drive change in local communities. If they can do it, so can we. There's a demand for multiple factions to see our urban canopy thrive, watch our green wealth grow, and pass this legacy on for generations to come. We're in a period of growth that we can tap into to make the most sustainable solutions today for the communities of tomorrow. The built environment plays a critical role in manifesting the future we want. The Garden City has an incredible amount of potential to be the most livable city in the world. I urge council members around the table today to sustainably keep the good green jobs we have, and let's be innovative with our ideas and proud of our hometown. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Taylor, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from council of Ms. Taylor? Councilor Williamson? Let's see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Taylor, you're talking about downtown when you compare it to, the study area is downtown St. Catharines versus downtown Guelph, or is it broader than that?
That's a good question. So the St. Catharines Downtown Association is a business improvement area, and there are, for context for the audience tonight, there are business improvement areas across the province. So we delineated the area based on the boundaries of the business improvement area.
Okay, thank you. More broadly speaking, we had Trio Code, which is a GIS, they had a website that mapped out where the trees are. It was not done necessarily by government, but by volunteers, I guess. And that website does not seem to be up anymore. Is there any platform that we have to know exactly what we have in terms of our inventory and the value of the trees in St. Catharines?
Actually, that's a very good question. So maybe I could take 2 steps back to take 2 steps forward to answer that. Through Niagara Open Data, which is a website, just Google it, you can pull inventory data for multiple, both green and gray infrastructure across the region. So St. Catharines has inventory data from 2016 in that portal. So that's the data that we pulled to do our baseline. So we did a physical census with 2 interns, and then we used our own data that we made in-house to compare it to that open source data that we pulled. If you wanted to see our inventory, we have a website available for the public and a Google map for people to navigate the urban forest downtown. But otherwise, I would not be aware of any other resources. The Trio Code, I know that was a very successful community-driven initiative, which, again, involving the community is essential in urban forestry, and hopefully my colleague can speak to that tonight. But nothing that I know available, just to answer your question directly.
Okay, and just for clarification, you're, once again, you're talking about the downtown business district, not broader St. Catharines, when you're referencing your mapping efforts?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Williamson. I have Councilor Dodge next. Councilor Dodge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the presenter for coming forward this evening. You touched on this a little bit, and I don't know whether you'll have the answer to this question, but for the city of St. Catharines, the size that it is, how many employees would be, expected to be able to maintain our forestry department?
So I can tell you that we connected with Guelph's forestry team, and they responded quite promptly. I have a list here of all of the jobs that they currently hold because they were quite transparent within the forestry department. So there's a general manager for Parks Department, a program manager for forestry and sustainable landscapes, an urban forestry field technologist, forestry and sustainable landscapes, urban forestry GIS technologist for forestry and sustainable landscapes, an inspector arborist for forestry and sustainable landscapes, a lead hand for forestry, 7 arborists for forestry, and 12 seasonal forestry workers. Associated to urban forestry are the natural area stewardship technologist and the natural area technician. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I was just jotting it down. Thank you very much for that. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Dodge. I have Councilor Ratliff next.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Thank you, Ms. Taylor, for your presentation. Recently, my ward mate, Councilor McPherson, circulated some of your research that you presented at the, among us councilors, that you presented at the International Association for Great Lakes Research. I'm just wondering, what was your motivation for submitting and going to that conference, and what are the tie-ins for the street trees in our city?
That's a great question, because trees in the Great Lakes often don't naturally come to mind, right, let's say. So there were different seminars that we could have participated in, and we selected what's called the Lake to Land seminar to show how what we do on land affects what happens in the water, especially our Great Lakes. So if many of you might not know that 12 Mile Creek runs and abuts our downtown here, and it outlets in Lake Ontario at Port Dalhousie. Anything that's happening upstream is going to come downstream. So the importance of using green infrastructure for whether that's erosion control, controlling contaminants, stormwater runoff, et cetera, plays a critical role. And we were able to speak to an academic audience that we don't necessarily get to tap into at that conference. But thank you for your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Ratliff, and I have Councilor Townsend next. Councilor Townsend?
Thank you, Chair. My question through you to Lindsay. This council, most people on this council supported a council motion to direct staff to increase the tree canopy up to 100,000 trees over 10 years. With the proposed cuts that are being recommended or brought forward, what potential impact might that have, and linking that up with studies you've done in other municipalities?
I'm going to take a moment to answer this question. So there are many considerations, especially within an urban environment, for reaching a planting objective of that caliber. A part of our research and what we identified, again, was that we can put many trees in the ground, but we need to make sure that when we're doing so, we implement the proper soil techniques, the site preparation techniques, and everything we need to make sure that those trees reach maturity. So while I agree and align with our big green dream, I want to make sure that the investment is there to meet our goals. And that's how I'd answer your question. But thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you again. So just to clarify, you have to maintain the assets that you plant.
Exactly. And invest in further green infrastructure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Townsend. Any other questions of Ms. Taylor? If not, thank you very much, Ms. Taylor. Much appreciated. And we will now call on Ron Hughes to present. And the next delegate, if he is perhaps in the overflow room, is Jeff Hurst. So if he can be ready to present after Mr. Hughes. Mr. Hughes?
First, I'd like to thank the council for allowing me to speak this evening. I feel that it's very important for me to be here this evening. I'd like to introduce myself and give you some of my background as it relates to this issue. My name is Ron Hughes. I'm a Chief Union Steward with QP Local 150, and I'm representing the outside workers. I'm a certified Ontario arborist, and having graduated from Sir Sanford Fleming in 2003 with an urban arboriculture certificate, I feel that I'm well educated to speak on this topic. I started working in the city in 2017. After 2 years in parks, I accepted a casual position as an arborist 1. I began my professional career working for the private for private tree companies throughout the Niagara region, including all the municipalities. Currently, I hold a permanent position in the Roads Department. I am supporting and maintaining and expanding the Forestry Department in the interest of a healthy and well-maintained tree canopy for the future. Here are some of the important points that support this critical decision. Firstly, the cost savings proposed by contracting out, you need to understand, is short-term thinking. We've seen examples in the past. We've seen examples of this in the past. The contractor's plan is to come in low and leave rich. But trees require long-term thinking, something that is sometimes hard to find. If contractors are not paid a costly retainer fee or a very high emergency response hourly rate, there is no guarantee that they will promptly respond to emergencies. This high cost ensures contractors will show up when needed. This is not fiscally responsible. Regardless of the proposed budget, in the end, we all know the cost will rise above the in-house forestry department budget would utilize. Secondly, an in-house forestry department can have arborists reassigned to different jobs which may be necessary for emergency situations. Also, during snow events, they do drive snowplows, using their knowledge and skills to help junior employees that lack experience, something which creates issues with junior staff accepting call-ins. Further, in-house workers, you have much better control over health and safety concerns and the related costs. Know that when it comes to property damage, injury, and death, the city has less control over contracted workers, but ultimately responsible for their actions. Tree work is a very physical, like being an athlete. Needless to say, the job involves a greater risk of injury. When injury occurs, in-house arborists can do tree inspections and related work like job planning and tree planting decisions. This is one very good way to be efficient because there is always work to do for injured arborists rather than having them on costly compensation. Our city vehicles are adorned with the city logo, and when taxpayers see us working, they know we are working for them. This makes us much more accountable to everyone. Conversely, when residents see contractors, they have no idea that they work for them also. When a resident speaks to a forestry worker, the crew has the knowledge and paperwork to gather necessary information which can be directly given to the appropriate department. This results in a much better response time, fewer avoidable costs, and less complaints. This is a win-win situation. The best way to ensure, for the future, the benefits of a healthy urban tree canopy is to maintain a fully staffed, knowledgeable, and trained in-house forestry department. We can observe this in other municipalities, as the previous speaker alluded to. Daryl Smith proposes proactive rather than reactive changes when it comes to water and sewer in order to increase efficiency and save money in the future. It is time to apply this same concept to trees. To plant a tree is to believe in the future of the next generations. We're here today to plead for a better future for our city's trees, which benefits all of us. You are not just counselors, you are leaders. Lead us into a more sustainable future, which includes a healthy tree canopy maintained by our City of St. Catharines Forestry Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Do any councilors have questions of Mr. Hughes? I have Councilor Dodge first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Hughes, it's a similar question to I asked to the previous presenter. What would you say would be a fair number of staff that we should have to be able to run our forestry department?
Well, currently we're budgeted for 9 in the forestry department. I think that 9 is a little bit short. I think that arborists should be involved with the planting process. Again, alluded to the other speaker. The contractors are not planting trees properly. They're not amending the soil. They dig a hole, they put the tree in, they mulch it, they stake it, they put a gator bag on, they leave. So we should really have more arborists than what we're budgeted for, so we can do more, such as planting, making planting decisions. These are arborists, they're trained to do this.
Okay, so what would your suggestion be if you could have the staff that you think that you need for the city? What would that number be?
I would say a minimum of 15.
15? And the 15 that you're speaking of, would they be able to do everything that needs to be done throughout the city to catch up on the backlog and to start to maintain and be proactive about our forestry department?
All the people that work in the forestry department do not need to be able to do everything.
Okay.
There's an arborist 1 and there's an arborist 2. An arborist 1 is a regular arborist. An arborist 2 has the ability to work around power lines. Most of the city trees are around power lines. It's not necessary that everyone who works in the forestry department be an arborist 2. There's lots of other work that can be done by laborers from the parks department. When you do tree work, there's a lot of labor. There's raking, there's traffic control setup. There's lots of things that non-arborists can do to assist the arborist when they are accomplishing a tree job.
Okay. That's great. Thank you for that information. It's nice to hear some of the duties that are needed to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodge. I have Councillor Williamson.
I'm good to go. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Hughes. Mr. Hughes, you mentioned that you had been employed with private contractors before you got into the public sector. I just wondered if you could maybe outline some of the differences between the two in terms of motivation. And we have a tree policy. You know it better than I do, but we don't really take down a tree unless it's dead, diseased, dying, or dangerous. I just wonder if you could maybe talk to that and talk to the difference between private contractors and having our own in-house professional arborist staff.
That's an excellent question. One of the differences that a lot of people don't understand is at the city we provide a service. We're not a business to make profit. That is one of the huge differences between the private contractors and the city. Private contractors do things as cheaply as they possibly can. I just addressed one of the things, which is having non-arborists on the tree crew. When I worked for the private sector, I did a lot of municipal work. Like I said, I've worked for all the municipalities. So the private contractor that sent me to these municipal jobs would generally send me with a new person. So they wanted me to train new people while I was on the city contract, because the contractor gets paid by the hour when they work for the city. So the amount of work they accomplish doesn't affect the amount of money they make. So, and the other reason that I was sent on the municipal jobs is because I wasn't fast enough to make money on the private jobs. So they sent me to the municipal jobs because I was slower and they were still making the same amount of money. Plus, I was an excellent trainer, so they always had me training new people while I was on the municipal job because I wasn't in a rush like you are on a private job. In the city, the equipment is much better. I can tell you when I worked in the private sector for over 15 years. My goal was always to get a job at the city because I wanted to work with smarter people. I wanted to work with better equipment. These are some of the major differences.
Thank you. And would there be, back to our tree policy, there's people out there who want trees cut all the time. We hear from them, but we have some standards. We try to preserve as many trees or as much of trees as we can. Is there a difference in how much of a tree the number of trees we'll be able to retain by going outside versus keeping the jobs inside? Would there actually be a difference?
Well, this isn't my opinion, but what some other people are saying is with the tree contractor, their job is to make money. So the more trees they take down, the more money they make. So a tree that might be saved, they might recommend that it come down. They take it down, they make money. I would like to see the arborists that work for the city more involved with the tree planting, because the trees have a better chance of surviving if they're planted properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Williamson. Any other questions of Mr. Hughes? I have a question, Mr. Hughes. You did mention early on in the presentation about contracting out that you had seen examples in the past that perhaps didn't work. Is there something that you can share with us, or that's not confidential?
Well, it's not necessarily related to the tree business, but I can mention the bathroom at Sunset Beach that had to be built twice. I'm reluctant to bring up the self-cleaning washroom, but since you asked, I will.
Okay.
That was a decision that was made by the previous council. I realize that, and I realize that the mayor broke the tie on that. But that's a blatant example of a bad decision. Another decision that I feel was a bad decision, even though it wasn't city council, was the Burgoyne Bridge. They went for the low bid. It ended up costing more than the other bid, and they ended up paying the other bidder a bunch of money because they didn't handle the bidding process properly. I know that's not your fault as city council, but it's an example of mistakes that are made by government.
Thank you for that. And for those watching it from the public, I know that our procurement bylaw, when they put out a request for proposals, they do look at not only whether it's the lowest bid, but also the capabilities and experience of those suppliers or vendors that are applying. But anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Hughes, for your presentation. Oh, sorry, and I have Councilor Kushner has a question. You're muted, Councilor Kushner.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chair?
Yes, we can now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The question I have is with respect to clarification as to whom makes the decision to cut a tree down. I thought the city would have made that decision and then the contractor cuts it down. I got the impression that from you, it may be incorrect, that the contractor makes a recommendation that the tree be cut down. Does the city then verify that?
Yes, they do. I've been in that situation as a private contractor where I've called the supervisor of forestry and he had sent me there to trim a tree. I got to the tree, realized that the best decision was to have it removed. I called the supervisor and they gave me the okay. So yes, the city does make the final decision, but they can be influenced by the contractor.
Okay, does the city normally agree with the contractor, or do they independently review the recommendation?
I'm assuming that they independently review the recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kushner. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Hughes. Oh, sorry, Councilor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair, to the presenter. I just have to say this and ask a question because it's bothering me if I don't get it out. I mean, I do value all the staff and all the work you do. But when you referred to, you wanted to leave your job to work with people that were smarter was the word, or less stupid, I think that's a real derogatory that you're saying. So if we're not working for the city, all these contractors don't know what they're doing, and I take a little bit of offense to the way you said that, and I don't think that's a proper thing to, and I just had to get that out, so.
Okay, well, if you would allow me, I can address that.
Mr. Hughes, I would prefer that we don't get into a discussion about that. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Miller. Oh.
That seemed like such a sour note to end on. So your presentation mentions the idea of private contractors sort of getting in at a low price and then that price actually going up So could you maybe expand on how that happens or what the sort of tactics or strategy?
If, right now, the private contractors, so to speak, are competing with the in-house forestry department. If there is no in-house forestry department, they're not competing against the in-house forestry department. So the cost, generally, this is what happens, is the costs go up. The hourly rate of the contractors will go up.
So basically, if we cut our department, sell all our equipment, our negotiating position is going to be severely hampered with these private
Yes.
contracts. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Miller, and I now have Councilor Phillips. I'm keeping you here, Mr. Hughes. I know, but the 5 minutes doesn't include the questions.
Thank you, Chair. You've been employed with the city for a long time. And obviously the reason that this discussion is in front of us is because it's been presented to us that we can save money by outsourcing forestry. Do you see efficiencies that could be done in order to improve the situation as far as monetarily, other than hiring another 6 or 7 people? Are there inefficiencies that can be made in your department that you see right now that could help us out?
Well, one example is when I was I'm assuming you're familiar with what a casual position is at the city?
Yes.
Someone who works 7 months? Okay, when I was an Arborist 1, which that position is no longer available at the city, I worked 7 months as a casual, as an Arborist 1, which means I can do everything but work around power lines. I didn't have any trouble keeping busy every day. So there is a way of reducing labor costs by having Arborist 1s, not just Arborist 2s. The other thing is we can pull laborers from parks or roads to assist the tree department in their jobs. There's no reason that you have to be an Arborist 2 to turn a paddle on the side of the road to control traffic. You don't need to be an Arborist 2 to rake up leaves and branches. You don't need to be an Arborist 2 to set up cones. You don't even need to be an Arborist 2 to drive the bucket truck. So there's lots of things we could do using less expensive help to make the tree department more efficient.
We can't hear you, Councilor Phillips. What are you saying?
Thank you.
Okay, was that it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, once again, are there any other questions for Mr. Hughes? Seeing none, thank you again, Mr. Hughes, very much appreciated. And we will now call on Jeff Hurst to present. And since the gallery is full, the next presenter scheduled will be Rory Bourgeois. And if you're not in council chambers, could you please make your way to council chambers and identify yourself to the security officer? Thank you. Mr. Hurst, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Garcia, council, mayor, and staff. My name is Jeff Hurst. I'm a Hague neighbor, and I love our city's trees. I'm here tonight because I want to see them thrive under the expert stewardship of the St. Catharines Forestry Department. Our arborists are an integral component of the city's staff. They know our trees, of course, better than anyone. On an individual level, they're familiar with the job, and they're invested in this community. Trees are key to our climate adaptation policy, and so are their stewards. We should be doing everything possible to support and even expand their scope of work, but don't just take my word for it. As I mentioned in my last delegation on this topic, I volunteer with an urban tree-focused group called Arbor STC. From August to October of last year, we canvassed roughly 400 households in my neighborhood. The conversations we had revealed some common themes, namely a deep sense of pride in our city's trees and stories of excellent service provided by the arborists. Residents want to see their capacity to work expanded upon. And this opinion is likely shared by St. Catharines residents at large. The online budget survey found that most respondents are in favor of setting the tax rate to maintain or enhance assets and services. Naturally, this would include trees and arborists. These survey results came in the midst of a search for efficiencies in the budget, the search for a 0% budget. Look where that search has brought us as we consider relinquishing the care and control of our canopy, an irreplaceable asset. This is where we find ourselves when we become fixated on rock bottom budget increases. I think we need to call outsourcing forestry services what it is, a gamble. The well-being of our canopy and the follow-through of our urban forestry management plan will be left to a private company with no vested interest in the city, just its own bottom line. And I want to make an important point on that. Individual private sector workers are not the risk here. Their ISA credentials are every bit as valid as those held by our in-house arborists. The real risk lies in privatizing public services in principle. Many municipalities, including our own, have tried it and failed, like ourselves with grass cutting, Hamilton with water and wastewater, and Ottawa with rec centers. Along the way, they incurred huge transitional costs and the loss of confidence from residents in the city's ability to properly manage its assets. In 2016, the Columbia Institute published a report on Canadian remunicipalization called Back in-House, and I'll tell you it's well worth a read. The reasons for keeping services in-house are all there. Cost savings in the long term, as Ron Hughes mentioned. Inadequate service delivery with contracted companies, disputes with those companies, and the increased control and flexibility gained with public service delivery, among others. And I want to stress that flexibility component because that's something that P3 advocates will often boast as a benefit to outsourcing. And there's a quote in that report from a Montreal borough mayor talking about sidewalk repair, which is something that they had outsourced and ultimately brought back in-house when things didn't work out. And he says, when a city staff crew is working on a project and sees a sidewalk nearby that needs repair, it can simply do the work, whereas a private contractor would leave it and stick to their contract. And that's a rather specific example, but to me, it spoke volumes about publicly accountable workers who see the whole city as their scope of work, not just a contract. And city staff having the opportunity to avoid the burden of countless piecemeal contracts and the inevitable issues that will arise from them. Now that sounds like an arrangement where forestry could provide excellent and timely service to our trees. And the best part is that it's realistic. We know it works. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Mayor and Council, the regard you have thus far shown our city's trees is commendable. The official plans you've approved chart a clear path to achieve environmental sustainability and employ best practices for our urban trees. This is an opportunity to take the next steps along that path. Peer municipalities have gambled and lost with privatization. Residents want the best care possible for our urban trees, and our in-house arborists are committed to the shared goal of a proud, healthy canopy for St. Catharines. Let's keep a good thing going and make sure that forestry stays public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hurst. Please remember, clapping and other demonstrations are not allowed. Can I ask if there are any questions of Mr. Hurst? Councilor Ratliff.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Thank you, Mr. Hurst, for your presentation. I'm just wondering if you could just give a little context to what motivated you to start Arbor STC and why your volunteers are passionate about the work, just to give us a sense of how a healthy canopy affects the daily lives of residents in St. Catharines.
Yeah, so I mean, long story short, I walked out my door one day and I saw one of the dwindling number of trees on my street being cut down. And for me, it was for no apparent reason. It made me angry, and I felt powerless in that moment, that I had no say over this, and this was just something that was happening beyond my control. And I live in the Hague neighborhood, which is an older neighborhood in our city. Our boulevards are very small, and the response that I got from the city when I reached out is that there would be no trees planted to replace this one because It just would not fit on our street. And that just made me feel, as I said, very small. So I knew then that I had to organize a group of dedicated individuals in our community who wanted to take a stand for our trees and take proactive action to increase their number. We have brought out city employees, environmental advocates, community leaders to become a part of Arbor STC. As I said, in October of last year, we planted 20 trees in my neighborhood, and we have plans to expand on that tree planting model throughout the rest of the city. Trees are something that are going to sustain our livelihoods and our climate adaptation capabilities for years to come. Ron said it very well. Trees are an investment and a commitment to the belief in future generations. And I can't speak highly enough of how that encapsulates what Arbor STC believes in and what our goal is to support our trees and make sure that they'll be around to support us as we deal with climate change.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hurst. Are there any other questions for Mr. Hurst? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Hurst. Oh, sorry. Councilor Dodge just raised her hand. Councilor Dodge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not really a question. I just wanted to, this may be out of our realm, but I just wanted to thank this gentleman and the group that they represent. What you said this evening was come across very neutral and very informed. So I want to thank you for taking the time to come here this evening to do that and for the things that you do for our city to keep our trees alive. Thank you for that.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Councilor Dodge. And seeing no other questions, thank you, Mr. Hurst. So we will now call on Mr. Rory Bourgeois to present. And the next delegate will be Sean Parkinson. So if he's not in the gallery, if he could make his way to council chambers and identify himself to the security person. Please go ahead, Mr. Bourgeois.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Rory Bourgeois. I'm a lifelong resident of St. Catharines. I'm a municipal operator, and I've been the union leader in charge of the forestry file since we received first notice of closure 1 year ago. I'm speaking to item 1 of the mayor's proposed operating budget, the elimination of our in-house forestry department. Before I begin, I'd like to address 2 things. 1, a job lost through attrition is still a job lost. And 2, any criticism of contractors is purely of the working conditions created by decision makers. A number of our members have previously worked for forestry contractors, and I encourage any contractors to join us in the future should we keep these jobs. From the beginning, we have been told our forestry work is costly and inefficient. Yet we have not been presented with a summary of costs that is transparent. The total cost cited, even on today's agenda, was for trees general. But that includes the current cost of contractors, supplies, clerical, vacant jobs, and other expenses. The report states that we would be able to maintain current service levels. However, there is no mention that we have not had a full complement of staff in forestry for years, or that the money allotted for the wages of our workers has gone unused. We are discussing the elimination of 9 forestry jobs, but as of today, we have 5 full-time arborists currently working in the department. The cost of contracting out is also grossly underestimated. Current costs are based on the service as a supplement to our work, and additional costs have not been properly considered, including the cost of monitoring and correcting problems with contractors, the cost of drawing tenders, assessing bids, and renewing contracts, unexpected changes to service levels, including through the spread of pests or climate-related emergencies. With a robust in-house staff, workers can always be redeployed to the city's highest priority work. Initial low bidding. Right now, contractors' pricing is based on competing for work with in-house staff. It is unlikely that prices would remain low once that competition is gone. A lot of points here. Higher turnover among private contractors could lead to improper pruning. which could lead to more problems and higher costs down the road. A lack of internal oversight could also lead to inferior work and preventable mistakes. The cost of storm response, which would require a hefty retainer, has been grossly underestimated. A lack of integration could cause greater confusion for residents, which would increase the cost and agony of directing complaints, not only related to trees, but for all city assets. City workers have a thorough knowledge of all city operations and are able to direct and document complaints internally. Residents know that any city-related issue can be brought forward to a truck with a city logo on it. Union workers offer public accountability. We have a permanent connection to St. Catharines, and we are better able to serve the interests of residents. Contractors are accountable to their employers who are driven by profit. With a natural asset like trees, this could lead to preventable issues that may go undetected for years. Union workers offer political accountability. When private contractors take complete control of a department, residents may not even know who is responsible for a service, and complaints to elected leaders can only be amended if they lie within the scope of that contract. This could lead to disputes over who is responsible, the city or the contractor. Union workers offer the flexibility of redeployment. Our in-house staff are routinely deployed as plow drivers throughout the winter. Forestry is high-skilled, but also high-risk work. Our in-house staff has an impeccable safety record through years of service. Lowest bidder contractors could be fiscally motivated to cut corners on health and safety. I've been communicating with a great deal of residents and environmentalists from across the city and region, and the message has been clear. The city of St. Catharines should be investing in its tree canopy by growing its in-house forestry capacity, not eliminating it completely. That is why I asked Council to amend item 1 of the mayor's budget and keep forestry public. Our city is only as strong as its frontline workers. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Bourgeois, are there any questions of Mr. Bourgeois? Councilor, yeah, Councilor Williams on it first.
I'm good? Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Bourgeois. The area my question centers on is emergency response. We know that with climate change, we're going to have an increasing number of even more extreme storm events. I just wonder if you could maybe describe what happens when in the city we face an ice storm or we have a lot of wind and we have a lot of branches and trees down. Staff called in on an overtime basis, and how do you offer as a unionized workforce flexibility in dealing with those kinds of events?
Right, yeah, so we respond to all emergencies. We have primary lists, backup lists, emergency lists, depending on your department and whatever. I will say the forestry list has recently been clawed back. They recently eliminated the backup list for some reason, but we have had backup arborists in the past. We have licensed arborists like Ron Hughes outside of the forestry department. That would be a backup list. So all of them would be called. I mean, right now we just have the 5 of them, but we could have a lot more. So you would go through the call-out list in an emergency, and then we have 1 hour to arrive to work. And then we would just get our standard overtime rate. I'll also mention that I'm a Ward 6 resident.
I'm sorry?
I'm also mentioning that I'm a Ward 6 resident.
Oh, okay. Oh, thanks. I'm not sure if that's a threat or what it is. Now you caught me off guard. And then in terms of, then are contractors also called in when there's emergency events, and how does that relationship work with staff?
Not typically, from my understanding. That would maybe be a question for staff, but my understanding is that the rate is significantly higher for emergency basis for contractors. And again, if we lost leverage, it would probably be significantly high. I know we saw it with snowstorms where I know Daryl spoke to, if you don't have a retainer, if you don't have, everyone's having a snowstorm at the same time. So other municipalities have paid the retainer, have first dibs, and then, so there are significant costs incurred, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Williamson. I have Councilor Lindo next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the presenter. Thank you, Mr. Bourgeois, for that presentation. It was excellent. A question, if you can clarify for me. You said there are currently 5 full-time employees in the forestry department. Are the other 4 either not there or are they taken up by seasonal employees?
So there have been recent retirements, and this has been on the horizon for a while, so they haven't been backfilling positions. So there is one arborist, I think, posted out, but I think for the rest of them, they would have to hire because of retirements. So again, that affects the efficiency if you only have
okay, thank you, Mr.
arborist twos. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, and we won't hold it against you that you're a Ward 6 presenter.
Okay.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Mr. Bourgeois. Are there any other questions of Mr. Bourgeois? Councilor Miller?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Bourgeois. I just a couple questions. I think it was a press release CUPE put out, and it referred a little bit to the mayor's budget maybe having overinflated labor costs. Could you just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so we've been having internal meetings. We've been trying to seek clarity on what our actual costs are, because the way it's been presented is the 2.2 million as if that is our labor cost, and we want to clarify that 2.2 million is not the labor cost of 5 arborists. So we've been trying to separate that, and I know that's the way it's written on the agenda, and I would hope that city staff could get clarity on that, but we'll see.
Okay, thank you for that. And also the report in front of us refers to the fact that the 5 arborists would be moved to other positions. Does sort of the union take a position on that?
Yeah, we would just have bumping rights within our contract. So I mean, they are, trained for life to be arborists, but they would bump into positions and then it would be assigned down the way, so.
Okay, and I don't know if you can answer this. I think our impression we get at council is there is maybe some relationship issues in the forestry department between management and workers. I mean, in the union's opinion, is that relationship repairable, fixable?
I've been seeking that. I don't know that it is. I've been trying really hard. We'll see. I mean, I think it would be helpful to have the union in closed session if that might help, because I respect that everyone's right to privacy. And also because I want to make sure that our contract language is followed on the proposals. But yeah, I mean, not to hash too much out, right?
Sure. Okay, I appreciate the candor there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Miller. Any other questions of Mr. Bourgeois? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Bourgeois. Thank you very much. And I will now call on Sean Parkinson to present, if Sean is here. I see. Go ahead, Mr. Parkinson.
Oh, thank you. Good evening. My name is Sean Parkinson. I am an urban forestry researcher, having worked alongside Lindsay Taylor through the St. Catharines Downtown Association. I've worked on forestry projects with the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, McMaster University, and most recently I was with the RBG as an invasive species technician. I am also a member of Arbor SDC. I'm here to oppose the outsourcing of arboriculture services and advocate for the importance of retaining in-house forestry staff. This past summer, with only 50 hours volunteering during an inventory project in a nearby municipality, I marked hundreds of hazard trees that required assessment and possible pruning or removal by an arborist. Meanwhile, almost every homeowner came out to speak with us, many about concerns for pruning on their properties. With only one in-house arborist in this municipality, not St. Catharines, it became evident how vital an arborist team is and how desperately residents understood the importance of those roles. When Lindsay and I conducted the downtown inventory in St. Catharines, countless passersby would stop to ask what we were doing, providing us with anecdotes of their own trees and showing great enthusiasm and support for our work. It is clear to me that people love trees and that the public greatly supports the services provided by an effective urban forestry department. Sorry, I'm chewing gum. With a median property tax of only $24 a year for forestry services in St. Catharines, and with such incredible understanding and support from residents, most would agree that our in-house staff are well worth the cost, a small price tag which seems oddly prioritized for the chopping block. With the mayor's proposal, our existing team of arborists will be transitioned to other full-time roles which are currently vacant, which sounds like a huge waste of their skills and a slap in the face to the work they've committed to over their careers with the city. This proposal cuts jobs and employs certified arborists in roles that do not respect their highly demanded qualifications. Looking at other cities, Kitchener is a leader in canopy growth, with a documented increase of 141 hectares in only 4 years, despite massive losses caused by the emerald ash borer. Their website cites that their forestry staff do structural pruning over years to develop a resilient branch structure. Maintaining a relationship with trees over years requires the ability to form that relationship. In-house forestry staff are able to build strong relationships with both the people and the trees of the city that can only be procured through long-term, consistent communication and service. That is not a privilege available to an outsourced staff. The City of London actively hires and develops the forestry staff with the explicit mandate of honoring their moniker as the Forest City. I cannot say I witnessed the same ambition from St. Catharines as the Garden City. In Guelph, a city with a nearly identical population size and density, they have an in-house arborist team of 9 and managerial staff, much like the current St. Catharines department, although I just found out there's only 5 arborists. But they also have 4 forestry technicians and 12 seasonal forestry workers, as Lindsay outlined. In St. Catharines, the Urban Forestry Management Plan, published in 2011, claims a target of 30% canopy coverage by 2030, with a rating described as far below acceptable standards. But there is no publicly available information on staunch initiatives to reach that goal. This effort to outsource the labor of those workers who actively dedicate their careers to the well-being of this canopy seems counterintuitive to our management plan's mandate. How does the City of St. Catharines aim to reach those canopy goals when we aren't even actively measuring our canopy? The last citywide inventory was completed in 2016. An inventory is only useful if it is updated and used to track progress and growth. While Lindsay and I have completed our inventory report for the downtown BIA in 2022, our recommendations presented to the city were to expand the department to help resolve the numerous concerns concluded through our data analysis. Again, instead we seem to be moving in the opposite direction with the outsourcing of our team of arborists. I also want to add that privately contracted arborists aren't stupid, but in-house staffing is a smarter management strategy. A strong ecological environment helps deter and reduce the spread of disease and mitigate challenges of climate change. In 2024, with a winter as mild as we are experiencing, with ongoing issues with emerald ash borer, beech bark disease, hemlock woolly adelgid, and now oak wilt, which was just identified for the first time in Ontario this past year, with multiple cases in the Niagara region, and with invasives and non-natives, including some of our own urban trees, like Norway maples, Callery pears, ginkgos, redbuds, and Siberian elms. I think you get the point. This is a crucial time for us to be investing in the future. It is critical we act now because forests take decades to mature. This is not the time to be backing down, making cuts, outsourcing. It is the time to highlight the importance of the existing arborist team, expand the department, and properly communicate with and involve the public. A public which is desperate for strong governance of the urban canopy across St. Catharines now and leading into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. Are there any questions from Council of Mr. Parkinson? Mr. Councilor Ratliff.
Sorry, through you, Chair. This is just a question about procedure. Can I ask staff to help answer a question that came up during the presentation?
I will defer to the deputy clerk, but my understanding would be that no, that has to be asked after the mayor's presentation.
All right, yeah, thanks.
Okay.
I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay, any questions of Mr. Parkinson? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Parkinson. And I missed to say that the next presenter will be Declan Ingham, and I should have asked whether he was here, and he is here. Thank you. And after him, we will have Pierre Parent. So go ahead, come on in, Mr. Ingham.
Did I not turn on the mic the whole time?
Yes, okay.
Okay.
Would you let me know if I can begin?
Please go ahead.
Council of St. Catharines, city staff, and the many residents on the benches. My name is Declan Ingham, and I am a researcher with the Canadian Union of Public Employees. One element of my job is to respond to privatization and contracting out threats to our members. After reviewing the mayor's proposed budget and the privatization of forestry services, I felt the need to visit St. Catharines. It wasn't a very far trip, don't worry, and add my voice to the chorus of people who want you to make a different decision. There are a number of reasons decision makers pursue privatization, but it almost always comes back to the mistaken assumption that the private sector can simply improve the delivery of services or reduce the cost of delivering those services. This simple assumption often turns out to be wrong, and many services that were once outsourced are finding their way back home. More often than not, they're coming home precisely because in-house delivery can cost less. This is happening around the world. Research from the business school at the University of Glasgow reviewed 766 cases of remunicipalization around the world. 45% were brought back under public management due to concerns over the quality of service, and 35% were achieved cost reductions. A survey from the United Kingdom by the Association of Public Service Excellence found 67% of 140 local governments surveyed were actively in the process of insourcing services or were considering to do so. In the US, a 2017 survey of 2,343 local governments found that nearly 15% had successfully brought services back in-house in just the last 5 years after having privatized them. The most common reason for doing this, cost and quality. Closer to home, as it was mentioned earlier, a 2016 CUPE report titled Back in House featured 15 Canadian case studies where local governments decided to return services back to the public sector. Of those cases, 80% were because, among other reasons, the price tag was actually better. I share this research not to bore you, but because I want to underline the reality that privatization is not some silver bullet to saving public funds or getting a better service. That myth has died a long time ago. Turning to the specific proposal at hand, the general argument in the mayor's amended budget is that a change in service delivery for forestry services will yield savings of $1.876 million over 3 years, from 2024 to 2026. This is an extraordinary claim. It is in fact more than an entire year of current forestry services, but it is not one that holds up to scrutiny. The proposed budget states that current costs to deliver in-house forestry services are approximately $2.1 to $2.2 million. This is incorrect. This is the budgeted amount. The actual expense is significantly lower. Current forestry services in 2022, the last year I have public records for, actually cost $1.6 million. This is only $2,000 more than what the mayor's budget proposes outsourced services would cost in 2024. So much for savings. Even more ambitiously, this privatized forestry department is expected to generate 11% in savings in the following year, bringing the total cost to $1.45 million, that is. Without any explanation of how this will affect service levels, this is fantasy math. Upon closer inspection of the previous operating budget in 2023, you find that in reality, 25% of the forestry budget is not actually going to public sector workers, but instead it's going to private sector contractors already, bringing the actual cost of public forestry services being provided to $1.2 million. And I think it's important to note here that the private contractor budget line grew in that forecast 11% from 2022 to 2023, which speaks to a rise in prices in private contracts as well. And St. Catharines already knows that private contracts can experience significant cost volatility, as demonstrated in 2019, when council moved unanimously to remunicipalize grass cutting and passive parks following a full privatization in 2011 after the lowest bid was over budget by 75%. I will take a second here to pull a quote from that 2019 staff report. Weeds are one of the biggest challenges the park's operation is currently facing, and the contractors aren't contractually obligated to pull weeds. I think this quote really speaks to the loss of control that public managers face when they contract services out. These cost reductions are also very unlikely, as the city adds thousands more trees to its inventory to meet the 30% urban tree canopy target and the 100,000 tree target. Given the importance of the tree canopy to the residents in the city, as you've heard here today, I fail to see why now, of all times, is the best moment to cut your professional staff who manage and keep this canopy healthy. What do I mean when I say keep the tree canopy healthy and argue that experienced staff protect St. Catharines trees better? I am not an expert in trees or urban forest management. So instead, I will quote the manager of Green Infrastructure Operations, Dan Cooper. Incorrect assessment of trees, as well as poor agricultural practices, can mean the untimely removal of trees that could otherwise provide the city, as well as the residents, with a vast variety of environmental and mental benefits that a younger and less mature tree can provide. In the end, improper maintenance will lead to removal or damage to the trees which green your city today. To close, budgets are a question of priorities. You have to put your money where your mouth is. To that end, I encourage all councilors to amend the proposed budget and vote against this unlikely gamble to try and save a few bucks, which I've hopefully discredited, by risking the healthy maintenance of your city's urban canopy and by eliminating good union jobs in your city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ringham. Are there any questions from council of Mr. Ringham? Seeing none, thank you again, Mr. Ringham, and I will now call on Pierre Parent. And after Pierre Parent, the next speaker will be Jennifer McKenna, so if she's in the overflow room, to please make her way here. Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Prawn.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Pierre Perron, QP Local 150 President. I was born and raised in St. Catharines and take a lot of pride in this wonderful city. I'm a certified arborist and a certified utility arborist by trade. I have worked in the forestry department as an arborist and backup supervisor until the forestry department was moved from Geneva Street to the Lake Street Service Center due to restructuring. My extensive experience in the forestry department affords me a greater understanding of this operation. I now serve the citizens of St. Catharines in the utility department as a certified underground service operator, but hold the forestry trade close to my heart. It is very disheartening that the entire forestry department is a potential going to be contracted out. This will have a negative impact on the arborists and their families, as their careers will be taken away from them. This will also have a negative impact on the citizens, our taxpayers. I would like to delve into the practices that will show why the numbers of running a forestry crew are not accurate compared to current contracted out forestry crews. One, our current contractors are assigned areas or streets which allows them to set up once and accomplish more at one location in a day. City crews put out fires, meaning they can be assigned dangerous trees that take them all over the city that day. They are also called away from setups to deal with emergencies and dangerous limbs. This constant breakdown of traffic control is necessary practice to remove dangerous limbs that could cause property damage or personal injury, but in turn, reduces the number of accomplishments or productivity that is reflected on paper. Another example of inaccurate productivity numbers is winter control. When arborists are assigned to help with snow removal, their time is still allocated to forestry, log time. When addressing work accomplishment in forestry for the year, the numbers are not accurate. Because of my time restraints, I can not give all examples, so I'll move on to addressing the union's attempt to deal with cost savings. In the past, the union tried to suggest ideas at labor management meetings, and more recently, meetings with the director of municipal works and the manager of parks. All our suggestions were rejected. In the forestry department, arborists are assigned to chip brush, flag, and other assorted tasks that that should be done by a lower costing laborer. This suggestion was rejected. The union suggested hiring a mixture of arborist 1s and arborist 2s. Arborist 2s are more qualified to work around electrical conductors. Arborist 1s could be hired and assigned to work around trees without hydro present, which in turn would cost less. This suggestion was rejected. The union suggested shift work. The vacant positions that exist could be filled with employees that would work afternoons or weekends to utilize our equipment more, therefore reducing the cost. This would alleviate the current contractors. When the corporation hires a contractor, they are paying for rental of equipment and the company's profit. Why rent equipment and pay profits to a contractor when we can utilize our own equipment more efficiently, which in turn costs a lot less? It is a shame I only have 5 minutes to speak, so I can't bring forth all the ideas the union suggested. It is a shame that the corporation prevented councillors from speaking to union representatives. Councillors need to know facts, how management are running city businesses to make a better decision on contracting out. Thank you this evening, because I will be able to answer those questions and get that information out. I welcome a lot of questions this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Perron.
It is the shame that management has not and will not implement these ideas. Not implementing these ideas drove the cost of running a successful business, in turn cost taxpayers. If a better business model is implemented, we could be very competitive with overall cost to run a successful forestry department with the added benefits of having internal public sector employees. I encourage you all to vote against contracting out our valuable resource. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perron. Are there any questions from council of Mr. Perron? I see Councilor Townsend. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the presenter. Thank you for your presentation. My question is in regards to, I know you had mentioned that you had brought a number of suggestions forward to staff. Can you maybe highlight just maybe some of the reasons why all of the suggestions were rejected?
You'd have to ask the manager of parks who rebutted those suggestions. I don't have those answers with me tonight. To the union,
okay,
they weren't feasible.
I can ask that question later to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Townsend. Councilor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Perron. Mr. Perron, you said because of time limitations, you couldn't get into a lot of examples. Is there one that you could maybe talk to specifically that would be useful for us to hear? Beyond what you've already said. You said you referred to some examples, but you didn't have, the 5 minutes limited your opportunity to do so.
Examples of cost savings?
Cost savings or your operational efficiencies, whatever you like.
One of the suggestions I put forth is to have a better young tree maintenance program. Right now, the trees that are planted too high. That's not proper arboriculture practices. The root levels are too high. The contractor does that because it's easier to dig a 1 foot hole than a 2 or 3 foot hole and properly bury the tree. In turn, when the tree gets older, it can't sustain. The roots are above ground, it dries out. A lot of those young trees die. And unfortunately, we don't have the staff that goes around to implement the guarantee on these trees, or it takes a couple years and the guarantee is gone. If we planted trees properly at the beginning and had a young tree arborist go around, I suggested a small truck, a pruner, etc. You take stakes off the trees so they're not girdled. I see a lot of girdled trees around St. Catharines. This is a shame. Why are we spending money on trees when nobody's taking care of them at a young age? We, as arborists, go and cut large limbs off when they're in blocking stop signs, etc., or over roads, over sidewalks. That needs to be done at a younger stage. This is being proactive, which will cost the city less money in the long run if you take care of your resource early.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Perron. Are there any other questions from council? Seeing none, okay, thank you, Mr. Perron.
Thank you.
And I would now call on Jennifer McKenna to present. And the following presenter would be Ms. Rachel Braithwaite. Please go ahead, Ms. McKenna.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening on the topic of keeping forestry public in the city of St. Catharines, the Garden City. I also do want to quickly just say how grateful I am this evening to have heard such exceptional notes along the same lines. I'm truly grateful. I feel this is an incredibly important initiative. I hope to speak today on this subject as a proud business owner in the downtown core, as a director of the SCDA, as chair of the Streetscape and Sustainability Committee, as a passionate St. Catharines resident, and as a scientist. Prior to my life as a business owner downtown, I worked as a geologist, my thesis in isotope geochemistry, and a master's degree in engineering, specializing in sustainable infrastructure systems. I have spent decades of my life researching our natural environment, and I consider our tree canopy as part of our natural living infrastructure system, which is paramount to the interconnectedness of our city's ecosystems. As a business owner, welcoming our customers who walk, run, and cycle the downtown every single day, many times with their happy dogs and some cats, we continuously hear about the improvements our customers wish to see, our community, of course, wishes to see in our downtown and our city as a whole. Trees and the shade they provide are at the very top of the list. We hear this every single day. Along with the benches downtown, more communal spaces such as the proposed Civic Square, more walkable trails along 12 Mile Creek, all of which would improve upon our current tree canopy and therefore increase the management required of said canopy. Truly, we could have opened our business anywhere. We are passionate about the heart of our city, the Garden City, and its path to revitalization. My husband and I are born and raised St. Catharines residents. We have big dreams for our business and big dreams for what we would like to see downtown. We see the potential. Like many others, some whom are here today, we have been diligently working to create and grow a downtown and a city that invites our community to live, work, and play in the core. In order to make this a reality, we must ensure that the built environment and green infrastructure is there to receive them. We must recognize that green infrastructure is part of the solution, and it must be managed. And to this note, that you cannot manage what you are not measuring daily. This managed approach will not only increase our tree canopy, its health, and the overall health of our city's ecosystems, it will manage hazards and continue to create the welcoming environment that we hear our community asking for every single day. The city must lead. And as mayor and as councillors, you must be leaders. And outsourcing is not leadership. Leading is improving the forestry department, managing and growing the tree canopy inside the Garden City, and fully adopting initiatives like Kevin Townsend's motion to plant 100,000 trees over 10 years. I feel, truly, that this will honor our city's strategic plan, our sustainability goals, and the wishes for so much of our growing community that speak to us every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKenna. Are there any questions from council of Ms. McKenna? Seeing none, thank you again, and I will now call on Rachel Braithwaite.
Thank you.
Please go ahead, Ms. Braithwaite.
Thank you.
Honorable Mayor Cisco, esteemed members of City Council, and distinguished guests. I have so many guests, which I'm so proud of. I extend my sincere appreciation for the arduous task that you, Mayor Cisco, and esteemed councillors, along with dedicated city staff, undertake to ensure budget considerations remain sustainable for the residents of St. Catharines. It's not an easy task, and I don't envy you. As the presentations were happening today, I was adding notes to my speeches, so I'm going off kilt for a second, because I am so proud of the staff, and very personal here, that I have. And I do believe that staff and people are the biggest asset an organization has. And when we lose those staff, it is a huge loss to our organization and our society. So I like to think everybody would agree with me that I have amazing staff who showed you today. So I also feel our city has amazing staff too. And hopefully I will keep going with that. In recent years, I've had the privilege of closely collaborating with councillors, dedicated city staff, and a vibrant community to contribute to the aesthetic enhancement of our beloved Garden City. Through this engagement, I have forged connections with business members and property owners who share a collective vision for investing in a vibrant future for our community. To realize this vision, it is imperative that we direct our focus towards strategic infrastructure investments that will foster a downtown environment where residents aspire to live. The heart of our city, our downtown, is deeply rooted in our urban canopy. In 2022, as heard previously, we embarked on a globally recognized large-scale inventory of downtown trees, emphasizing the crucial importance of planting trees with the proper planning, preparation, and proactive maintenance to ensure their optimal growth and long-term value. Planting trees without the necessary foundation and ongoing support is wasteful. It is better to plant 10 trees the right way with support and ongoing maintenance than planting 100 trees to meet a quota for them to die within a year. However, we do love the ambition and approval of Councillor Townsend's motion to plant 100,000 trees over the next 10 years, and we fully support this and appreciate his desire to see some of these trees planted downtown, but do feel it is imperative to have a strong team behind that motion. While acknowledging the inherent challenges of planting within the urban core, an endeavor often marked by complexity and higher costs, we must recognize that the city stands to gain the most from strategic tree planting initiatives. Increasing the urban canopy in areas where there is a deficiency and areas where they have the most potential for increased residential densification will provide the biggest return on investment. Residents and developers will be attracted to the enhanced aesthetics, the reduction in heat island effect, stormwater management, carbon sequestration, and the fact that our city is sustainably planning for the future. The instantaneous beautification and enhanced livability the trees afford are paramount of importance to our local businesses and community at large, hence the full audience tonight. And very great speakers. Not me, that wasn't me. I'm a great speaker. Which will enhance, through that, the importance of the local business and community at large improvements, will enhance the tax base and economic viability of our city. To create a solid or permeable foundation for this initiative, it is imperative that those entrusted with planting, preparation, planning, and long-term proactive maintenance collaborate seamlessly. Outsourcing the forestry department will jeopardize this vital collaboration and direct oversight. Moreover, tracking the success of this initiative becomes an arduous task, compounded by the fact that the last tree inventory was conducted 8 years ago. In alignment with our commitment to fostering collaboration, oversight, and continued success of our urban forestry initiatives, we wholeheartedly support a motion to retain, if not expand, the forestry department in-house. Reduction of the backlog and a proactive approach in the future is what is needed. In conclusion, let us stand united in our commitment to a flourishing and vibrant future for St. Catharines. Together, we can create a legacy of sustainability, resilience, and enduring beauty for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Braithwaite. Are there any questions from council of Ms. Braithwaite? Seeing none, thank you again. That concludes the presentations by the 10 individuals who had registered to speak. Before we move on, is there anyone else who did not register who wanted to speak? Huh? No? Sorry, I take that back. I'm told that because this isn't a public meeting, I can't do that. So, the clerk rules, so. Okay, so, yeah, so we need a motion to receive or we need the motion receiving the delegation, so we will get it on the screen. Okay, it's a motion that council receive the delegations from all of the individuals who spoke. Can I get a councilor to make that motion? Councilor Stevens, seconded by Councilor Ratliff. All in favor? That's carried. So I wanted to thank all of the presenters for taking the time to give us your opinions, and obviously well thought through presentations and professional, and thank you for sticking to the 5-minute limit, which I know sometimes it can be difficult. Councilor Williamson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilor Ratzlaff asked about when we might get staff responses to a lot of the questions that have been raised. Is there, through you to the CAO, to the clerk, how are we going to get responses from staff to the information that's been presented tonight? And how will that happen before decisions are made?
Thank you. I will look to the CAO to comment on that.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. There's a couple options. One being questions can be asked to staff after the mayor's presentation, or if there's any more detailed questions, council can make those specific requests, and we can have those provided ahead of the January 22nd meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I guess,
Mr. Deputy Chair?
just to sort of supplement what the CAO said, item 10 on the agenda is request for information on the budgets. So that would be a great opportunity tonight where if a councilor had a specific question that they wanted information on prior to the next meeting, we could bring those up then, we could have them documented, and then that way staff can prepare memos with answers in time for the next meeting. So I think that might be the cleanest route to go if there's a list of questions that councilors have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Williamson. So having heard the presentations and receiving the delegations, I will now call upon Mayor Cisco, who will be presenting the 2024 to 2026 multi-year capital budget, water and wastewater budget and associated rates, and operating budgets. Mayor Cisco?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Council. Thank you to the residents who are here this evening. I will admit, I thought that I was done being the person presenting budgets, but here I stand again this year because of the province of Ontario. I do want to start off by thanking Councillor Garcia, who is our budget chair, who I think has done an exceptional job over the last year. I want to thank him and the members of the budget committee who have taken their time to go through the financial information and have informed what is in this budget today and who will continue to inform over the next 3 years as we run the course of this term. As was mentioned, this is a new process this year. Just checking, the presentation disappeared behind me. This is a new process this year. It was brought about by the province of Ontario through the Strong Mayor legislation. It is not something I had expected to be doing, but it is something that the province has said is a requirement, and so here we are today. My presentation is fairly brief. I will go through the different budgets. They were presented by staff on November the 22nd of 2023, and then I will identify the changes that were made. For the first two budgets, water, wastewater, and for capital, very limited changes. It is the operating budget which has the most significant changes and the changes that were directed by my office, and so I will speak to those more thoroughly. For starters, we have the capital budget. Those who have had the opportunity to read the report will know that it is informed by the asset management plan. Phase 2 was passed last year by council. The capital budget only changed in one way, requiring a top-up budget for a 125-foot aerial fire truck in fire services. The costs associated with that procurement have gone up by $732,000, so only one pumper truck will be replaced in '24. The other replacement has been deferred outside of the term of the multi-year budget, and there is no net impact on the capital budget. This is the only change from what was presented on November 22nd. The second is the water and wastewater budget. There was a regional error that led to an increase in the regional portion of the water wastewater budget. That error will be paid for using reserves, so it also does not have a material impact. This is the only change from the staff presented budget on November 22nd. That leads us to the operating budget. There are some key changes from the staff presented budget. The first one is a levy reduction of $500,000 for the 2024 to 2026 years. So each year, a reduction of $500,000 using dollars saved in previous years due to part-time staff hiring delays. We've had long conversations at council about the fact that there have been hiring delays, that there are a great deal of what we call gapping dollars left over at the end of the year. This was an effort on my part to identify how we could flow those dollars back through a tax reduction for residents. Residents are being charged for services they are expecting to deliver, but when we have difficulty hiring staff, they're not receiving the full extent of those services. This is an effort, and I think a responsible effort, to set aside some of the money that is saved from the part-time hiring delays and use that to fund the part-time positions in future years. As I said, it results in a lowering of taxes and a lowering of the levy by $500,000. The second is a reduction of $465,000 in the forestry budget with no service cut through contracting out, with savings rising to $701,000 in 2025 and $710,000 in 2026. Obviously, there have been a lot of comments about that this evening, so I do want to address some of the things that have been said. It should be noted the current complement is 9 arborists. There are only 5 currently hired. When there are 9 arborists, the labor costs, I believe, are in the range of about $1 million. The 4 vacancies that exist because this process, with respect to making a decision about whether to contract out or not, began about a year ago, and staff made the decision at that time not to fill vacancies as they came up until a decision had been made so that we could accommodate the positions elsewhere in the corporation, which is the case. This does not represent a cut in service. I heard a councillor say that earlier. It does, however, represent a reduction in cost and a change in philosophy with respect to this portion of the forestry services. It should be pointed out, though, that in this portion of forestry, with taking down trees, about 60% of the forestry is already contracted out. The stumping is also already contracted out, and the tree planting is already contracted out. So this is a continuation of that process, but it does not represent a cut to service. It represents a reduction in cost. It does not have an impact on tree planting, and a number of presenters have come up and spoken about the need to plant trees. I agree. But this has nothing to do with that. The tree planting has been contracted out previously. A number of comments were made with respect to the maintenance of trees. When we talk about the maintenance of trees, and I think one of the presenters talked about what sounded to me like juvenile pruning and a juvenile pruning program, which allows a better lifespan for trees. This is not a service option that council has found feasible, and the maintenance and increased costs associated with maintenance is not something that council has found feasible in the past. I will say, the purpose of the amendment process is for council to make amendments. I've had good conversations with Councillor Ratzlaff. I know he is going to be bringing an amendment forward at some point. I encourage council to listen to the residents, to listen to the folks who've been here today, to listen to others in the community, and to make the decision. Council needs to make that decision. But I would suggest as well, given the comments that were heard today, I am fully expecting to hear that someone will make an amendment as well to bring other services back in-house. Because based on the conversations that I've heard, that's the direction that the people here, at least this evening, making presentations have indicated. All of this comes with a cost, and I respect that. But I will remind council, Earlier in 2023, we had a very large debate around the budget. We had a very big debate around taxpayer affordability. And the overriding message that I heard from residents and councilors was that we needed new ways to do things and we needed to do more with less. The forestry cut, because the question was asked where this could have come from, the forestry cut and the cut in cost came from that. It is council's prerogative to not go forward with the contracting out, and I respect that. I've been very clear to Councillor Ratzlaff. If this amendment passes, I will not veto it. I have no interest in vetoing it. This is a decision that this council has to make. But this council has to make that while remembering the conversation around taxpayer affordability and the demand for many residents, as well as many councillors, to do more with less and to change the way we do things. There's an additional savings in the operating budget of $250,000 from the consolidation of contracted security services. And there's also the use of $1.431 million from the Special Tax Mitigation Fund set up by Council in 2023 to help in reducing the tax burden on residents. That special fund was set up last year and is intended to be spread across the 3 years. So if you look in the report that was put out, that approximately $5.2 million is spread out across the 3 years to ensure that we're not creating a large gap that has to be backfilled with levy. So this provides us at this time with a city levy of a 1.49% increase. That results in an estimated 0.61% increase in the average property tax bill for residents. Now, on this slide, I have a great deal of information, and I will stress to everybody who is here that these are estimated numbers. They are not finalized. These are estimated numbers. But the current city levy for the property tax bill, the increase would be $25.47, or a 0.61% increase. That is as the budget currently stands. If council makes amendments, and those amendments either increase or decrease the levy, that number will increase or decrease. But that is fully within the purview of this council, and I look forward to the amendments. Additionally, the region's estimated levy property tax bill increase of $126.03 approximates to about 3.01% on the average tax bill. The region's special levy property tax increase, which encompasses waste management and transit, amounts to a $14.36 dollar increase, which is a 0.34% increase on the property tax bill. And the education property tax increase, which is also estimated, is $3.21 or 0.08. So that leads us at this time to an estimated total impact of an increase of 4.03%. But the city's portion of that at this time is about 0.61%. The question of vetoes has come up, and so I wanted to address it this evening. I have been very clear. I do not plan to use the veto in this particular budget process. However, there are instances, and I wanted to be fully clear and transparent with council as to the instances where I would feel compelled to use a veto. And I've had this conversation with a number of councillors who've reached out. Most of them feel comfortable with these being reasons as well. An amendment that may harm residents or services they depend on, I will veto. An amendment that I believe may harm the city, I will veto. An amendment that is not submitted under the appropriate deadlines. Those deadlines were outlined by staff at the beginning of this evening. I think those deadlines are important. They're important for a number of reasons. They're important so that everybody has the appropriate amount of time to review the amendments that have been made, that staff has the appropriate amount of time to be able to identify what the savings are and what the implications to services are. And so if an amendment is not submitted under the appropriate deadlines, I will veto that amendment. I will veto an amendment that is contrary to previous council decisions. So if council makes a decision around this horseshoe with respect to this budget that runs counter to something we've already decided in this term of council, I will veto that. I will veto an amendment that is too broad or too vague. And the city clerk did a good job, I think, at the beginning of talking and speaking to that. If councilors are making amendments to make cuts or to make increases, my request is that they're specific. One of the delegates was very specific when they talked about an amendment they were hoping to see, that the forestry changes be reversed and kept in-house. That is a specific amendment. I would have no interest in vetoing a specific amendment. But if councilors make amendments along the lines of, I'd like to see the CRCS budget reduced by 2%, that is not a specific amendment. I will veto that because that is not providing appropriate guidance as to what areas need to be cut. Finally, amendments that would raise the levy by an unacceptable amount. This is fairly broad and fairly vague. Unfortunately, I can't put a number on that. As I mentioned, if council were to pass the forestry amendment, I do not consider that to be raising the levy by an unacceptable amount, and I would not veto it. I want to be clear about that at this time. With that said, as I mentioned, I did not expect for this to be my budget to present when this term started. I thought Councillor Garcia would be standing here in the new shoes, but instead I had to go out and purchase a new pair of shoes today, and so I look forward to any questions the councillors may have. I will preface this, however, by saying that I am available to continue to answer questions after this evening and will happily provide written or spoken answers to anything that anybody has to ask. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that presentation, and thank you for your efforts to try to keep the operating budget and the other budgets in as low as possible. And before I take questions from council, I want to emphasize for those watching at home and everybody else here that penultimate slide was very helpful because he highlighted in yellow what the city is doing. Keep in mind that that is the only line that we as a council control. The others are the region and the education department, and we cannot control those. But there's a real effort in this budget that he has presented to at least keep our portion low. So having said that, are there any questions of council for Mayor Cisco?
Someone's got a question. Come on.
Councilor Ratliff.
Thank you, Chair, through you. I've just had some calls about two items in the budget that I know what they're for, but I just thought I'd give you an opportunity to share. I think that the business cases that were made at the end of the document are really helpful. I think that was new this year, but I found them super great. It really demonstrated that staff are really passionate about the work that they do. But I think you had some business cases in there as well. And so one of the items that I've been contacted about is the Civic Reception Fund and then council expenses. So I know that, not to preempt your answer, but I'm passionate about moving away from reserves. And I know that Civic Reception Fund helps with that. And then also we have a celebration coming up that maybe you might like to tell folks about.
Where to go? There we go. Thank you, Councilor Ratzlaff. I would love to talk about civic receptions because there's been a fair bit of misinformation out there in the public. There was a motion made through the Budget Committee several years ago, and I know because I made it, asking that we shift away from recurring expenses being taken from reserves. The idea was that our reserves are there for one-time expenses, for non-recurring expenses. But we had a number of items on there that were every year, and that we were trying to move away from. Doing it all in one shot would have been overly burdensome on the taxpayer, and so the process has been spread out over a number of years. I will note that this was, it was pretty unanimously endorsed, this movement away from the use of reserves. Things like skip grants were on reserves, and we made a commitment, and I give credit to Councillor Garcia, and I believe Councillor Phillips, when we were revamping skip grants a number of years ago, we said we have to get this off reserve. It's important for this to be a part of the levy because this culture is important to us. By that token, the civic reception line right now, there are a couple increases. There's a $25,000 increase for Canada Day to the levy budget. That takes, I believe, and I'm going to make sure that the Director of Financial Management is staring at me and giving me a wink if I'm wrong. I believe the budget for that was $24,000 coming out of the Civic Project Fund. It's been increased by $1,000 because of inflationary costs, and it's been moved into that civic reception area. She's not yelling at me yet, so I should be okay. The holiday celebration, which we call Let It Glow, which has been very positively received by the community. There's a cost of about $30,000. Some of that came from Civic Project Fund. Some of it was spread in other parts of the corporation. That $30,000 is now in the civic reception budget. Additionally, there's a $25,000 line item there for what we can refer to as one-off events, although they're not really one-off, they're just not regularly recurring. But in the interest of taxpayer accountability, and transparency, we felt it was important to put them in there. They're events, and I'll give the example. Councillor Garcia last year brought a motion to waive the fees for the street closures for the Terry Fox Run.
Yeah.
This is going to be a recurring expense because I think we all recognize the value of the Terry Fox Run, and we want to see the dollars they raise going towards cancer research as opposed to paying for road closure fees. But we can't simply waive the fees. The dollars have to come from somewhere. So that line item is there for those sorts of events. Another example that I could give is the dog run that we used to do when the Ice Dogs made the playoffs. No comment further on that for this year. But we would shut down St. Paul Street. There's a cost associated with that. We would staff St. Paul Street with CRCS staff, with games and things going on. There's a cost for that. That line item is there for those types of events. And they come up every year. There's lots of different examples in all of the different wards, but these events are all events that have a citywide impact, and so we thought that it was important for transparency's sake to have that there. The final item is a $30,000 item related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It came directly out of the motion that was passed last year by council unanimously, and really deals with a lot of events that, again, we are already doing, things like Indigenous Peoples Day events, where there is a cost. We're trying to find somewhere in the city that can accommodate those costs. That's not particularly transparent and accountable because we're pulling from areas that maybe the budget isn't specifically for that type of an event, and it's been put there. So what we said is we're going to do this because we know that we're making efforts to try and include more diverse communities across the city into the social fabric of what City Hall is doing. So as an example, we're hoping to partner with Black Elm 905 and Matter of Black for events during Black History Month. We have done the events with the Indigenous community, with the Niagara Regional Native Center. There are other groups within the community that we know we want to help partner with in small ways to be able to accentuate and make their voices louder. Again, that flowed directly out of that motion back in, I think, April. And so that's where those dollars come from. It has been, I think, misrepresented as some sort of party fund. I wish I had a $111,000 party fund, but I don't throw that good a party anyways. But the reality is that it goes towards primarily things that we've always been doing. It's just budgeting for them in what I think is a more transparent and accountable way.
That's helpful. Thank you. Just a point for clarity's sake. We will have something to discuss. Like we won't be voting anything today, but we'll be accepting the presentation. We will discuss the presentation then, right? Like this is just for asking questions of the mayor. But after this, we'll be accepting the presentation. We will talk about the presentation more generally with staff. Is that correct?
The questions for the mayor or staff are right now, as far as I know.
All right, thanks.
I would, if I may, Chair, if we could ask the questions of me, and then I can go and sit down and maybe council can continue to ask questions of staff. Not that I don't want to stand here, but there may be long-winded budget questions and answers that I can't answer.
Fair enough. I would suggest also, since we had all those presentations to do with forestry, so they could have raised a lot of questions, that if councilors have specific questions, I would suggest that you please send them directly to the staff department in charge so that they have time to look at these questions, because there was a lot in those presentations. So,
all right, thanks.
Okay, I have Councilor Miller.
Thank you. I think some of these I'll probably end up sending to staff. Just a question. I think Mr. Ingham talked to the variance versus the actual cost issue with regard to forestry. One of the other issues was the sort of the oversight of contracting out. Is that factored into the cost? Or are we expecting more administrative costs to oversee private contractors issue these tenders and things like that?
So I would suggest that they may be more fully explained by staff, but I will say that yes, that's a part of the overall cost.
Okay, and I think I'll save some of my other questions for staff. Did you watch the college football national championship game?
Not a chance. I hate Michigan with a living passion, and so there is no way I could have watched that game.
That's a shame. Go Blue.
Thank you, Councilor Miller. Councilor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a nice opportunity to grill the mayor. I like this, and I won't abuse the privilege, but I'll stick to the theme of tonight. We've heard from some people who do have vested interests. We've heard from a lot of people who just are here with no personal stake, that just actually care about the state of our urban canopy, care about our natural environment. And the people who, and I'm not in any way belittling our staff, because they also, I think, deeply care about what's happening. And this council has passed a climate change emergency. This council has said we're going to plant 100,000 trees, increase the tree canopy by 30%. But actions speak a lot louder than words. And we've heard a lot of suggestions in how to do things, and one of the ones that really resonated with me was the person who said, who has incredible credentials, by the way, cannot manage what you, you can't manage what you can't measure, and we haven't even really kept up to date with the inventory of our trees. So we need to, I think, have a reboot in a big way in terms of how we manage. You mentioned also that we in the past, and I don't specifically recall it, but looked at managing juvenile pruning, and we had a gentleman, Mr. Perron, talk about the fact that we need to plant our trees better to begin with, deeper in the ground, and that kind of stuff. So I guess out of all what the conversation that's happened tonight is, I think that, and I will be asking for, and I think Councillor Ratzlaff has already suggested we need to have responses from staff, but I think we need to really look at how we're doing, and there's been comparisons made to Guelph and Kitchener and London, and I think we have some catch up to do and some improvements we have to make in this area, and I think that's been highlighted tonight generally. I'm not going to get into all the specifics.
Councillor, and I will just say, I agree with you. I want everybody to be very cognizant of the fact that there are costs associated with this. But by and large, I'm not opposed to council bringing forward. If there is a philosophical change that we want to go down, then I think that's important. And it would be very heavily informed by the presentations that we've heard this evening. But ultimately, that needs to be brought forward by council, and we need to have a coherent plan that makes sense over the course of however long that plan's going to last. I don't disagree with you. I will say I heard about what other municipalities are doing. I've had conversations with the mayor of Guelph and with the mayor of Kitchener and with many of the big city mayors around us, similar size, some bigger, some smaller. Ultimately, it comes down to dollars. And there are costs associated with this. And again, if council makes the decision that those costs are well borne, then we will bear them. But those are amendments that need to come from council. And I will reiterate, because I think it's important to say this. We were inundated 8 months ago with hundreds of emails talking about taxpayer affordability. And again, the overriding message was, do more with less, do things differently. What I've presented is an opportunity, but it is not one that this council has to accept. The amendment can be made and move forward. But I think if we make that amendment, then we do have to have a conversation about the philosophy we are going to embrace around trees. And to your point, maybe it has to change. That's a debate we actually have to have. And I do want to say, the reason why this was brought forward for this budget is very specifically for one reason. Because it was raised last year by staff, and it was given to us, and then nothing happened to it. And I will say, one of the things that has frustrated me in my time as a councillor and now the mayor is when ideas are presented, we don't make a choice one way or the other, and it simply sits there. And I think I'm not going to talk about any of the other times this has happened because I don't want to reopen old wounds, especially for my Meriton colleagues. But situations where we keep talking about a possibility of doing something, but we never actually make a decision on it. I brought this forward because I want this council to make a decision so we don't have to talk about it again. If we make the philosophical decision to go in one direction, then we're going in that direction.
Well, but the leaders, us, the council, have made the big policy decision that we want to see a greatly improved urban canopy. And we don't do the day-to-day work. We have to rely on people who provide us with the information and the policies and the plans to make it happen. And that's what we need to fill in to achieve these goals that we've set.
I agree with you 100%. but the recognition has to come that comes with a dollar value attached. And we have to make the decision then, if we're going to go forward, to add those dollars, which means increase taxes. That's a decision for council to make.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson and Mr. Mayor. Are there any other questions from council? I see Councillor Dodge. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the mayor. When it comes to the forestry, I asked for a report, and we're just getting that back now. And to be honest, I haven't read it since we were talking about this on Monday. I believe we had a chit chat about this stuff. And I think that, you say do more with less, but I think that we need to look at it like we need to do more with less, but we also have to do it better, and we have to come to terms with how we can come up with that process.
You will not get a disagreement from me, Councillor Dodge.
Yeah. So and I have several questions actually that I'll ask back to staff, but I think there's a lot of things that have been brought forward tonight that we need some answers for moving forward, and so we can make some good decisions on this. And maybe some of it can be done without having actual huge hits to our taxes. Maybe there's a way we can do it better without doing that. And I look forward to staff working with them to come up with some of those answers for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodge. Are there any other questions from council for Mayor Cisco? Seeing none, can I have a councillor make a motion to receive his presentation? Chair. Yes.
One more brief statement. I just wanted to say thank you to the finance staff, Ms. Douglas, and her team. There are a number of them here in attendance tonight. I will point out very clearly, and I just want to make sure that this is clear, the changes that I outlined on that slide were decisions of my office. I appreciate the staff recommended budget that came forward in November. I've outlined the alterations that my office made. But I did want to say thank you to staff. I think they worked very hard over the course of the last 6 months. I think they heard the messages from the community very clearly last year and went out of their way above and beyond to try and build a budget which recognized those changes. I also wanted to take a moment just to thank the councillors who have reached out over the last couple of months and had conversations with me about what they wanted to see and what they didn't want to see in the budget. While we didn't always agree or disagree, I appreciate the feedback, and I look forward to the next couple of weeks and the amendments that come forward and the discussion that takes place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and you're absolutely right in thanking staff because they always do a lot of work on budgets, but of course this year all the rules changed, so they're dealing with a new process just like we are, so very much appreciated. So can I get a councillor to make a motion to receive the mayor's presentation? Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Lindo. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we will move to number 9, call for notices of motion to amend the budgets at the meeting of January 22nd, 2024. So I remind everyone the process that the clerk described, that the mayor has now presented the budget. We have asked some questions. We can send in more questions, but now there is a possibility for amendments, and they have to be sent in for 2 meetings, and the first one is on January 22nd. Now, so far, I understand that both Councillor McPherson and Ratliff have submitted notice of motions of amendments. So I will look to Councillor Ratliff first for a brief explanation of his amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through you. Just very briefly, I just want to echo some of the things we've heard, but the reasons for the motion that I plan to bring forward on the 22nd. It has to do with forestry, and the first has to do with accountability and the way that our public sector is able to be accountable to residents And when we outsource, there's that danger that the competitive bidding process that's fueled by profits can taint that accountability chain. And we want to keep it out. Like when we talked about the water treatment or drinking water budget tonight, and I think that it's really clear the dangers in outsourcing when you think about your drinking water. And when we talk about trees, we're talking about the air that we breathe. When a service directly affects the health of the residents of St. Catharines, I think it's really important that it's accountable to those residents. The second point that I'll just echo is has to do with, there was one other one here, hold on. Yeah, we're gonna be, in 2 years, we're gonna be celebrating our 150th year birthday as a city, and there's some trees in our city that have been around for 150 years. And trees take a long time to grow. They require a long memory. And I think that an institution like municipality, it has the memory, has the ability to care for an asset that appreciates over time like trees. When you introduce a competitive bidding process, you're having a number of different contractors come in and out and look after our trees, and they don't have the memory, they don't have the knowledge necessary to safeguard and to guide our tree canopy in the way that we need it to continue to increase. We heard there's we're aiming for a 30% canopy coverage, and we want to do better than that. And we need our public sector who has the skills, who has the knowledge, and has the institutional memory that is adequate to address or to care for that asset. And so, yeah, my motion will be to amend the budget to revert back to what staff had originally recommended in their operating budget. And so that's to keep forestry public. So thanks.
Thank you for that, and you will submit the exact wording to the clerk's office, and they will have.
Yeah,
it
we're in the
on
process of working on that now.
agenda, yeah.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Councilor Ratliff and Councilor McPherson. You also had a different motion?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the amendment I'd like to bring forward is to, with regards to the business license fees and patio fees, reducing them to continue our support for small businesses and our downtown specifically, reducing the patio fees by 50, business fees and patio fees by 50% for 2024, 2025, and by 25% for 2026. And I have submitted it, and I've spoken with staff about it. So.
Thank you, and you will liaise with staff to identify the
It's all been
financial implications of that.
Yep, all been
Okay.
done.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Does any other councilor have any notices of motion they want to make at this time regarding amendments for January 22nd council meeting? Seeing none. Oh, sorry, Councilor Miller.
That's okay. Easy to miss over here. I just, I know Councillor Ratzlaff has his amendment with regards to forestry, but I've emailed the clerk about changing the forestry budget to bring some of the contracted out services back in-house to the forestry, so changing that budget, and I will work on getting the specifics with the clerk and the finance department in due time, because I think we heard some of the concerns with the private operators, the quality of service. So I'd like us to look at restoring some service levels in-house.
Thank you, Councilor Miller. Again, any other notices of motions for amendments for January 22nd? I see. Councilor Williamson, please.
Thank you.
Trying.
I will have one, but as the mayor suggested, they need to be very specific. So just to let you know that I will have one, but we'll have to have it worked out with some details before I bring it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Williamson. Anyone else? Okay. Seeing none, do we need we need a show of hands to support those? No? No? Okay, I'm told we don't need that. So the last point on the agenda, workable one, was request for information about the budget. So we talked a little bit about that. So if you have any specific requests that you want to make right now about information about the budget, you can make it now, or you can submit it to staff directly. Yeah. Yeah. I'll let the CAO elaborate on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think what, in light of what we heard tonight and a lot of the information, if councilors have the specific questions, if you can forward them to staff, and if I can ask, we have the 15th as the sort of the date for the amendments. That should give us enough time to be able to have the memos for the meeting of the 22nd.
I'm certain that staff will want to respond to certain of the comments that were and information that was presented tonight. But so I'm happy to put forward some of those questions too. But I think there's going to be probably I might not cover them all. So yeah, hopefully staff can review the tape and respond to those points that have been made.
Yeah, I don't need the information right now, but just so I don't forget between now and writing an email to staff. One of the increases was to the beach budget and security, and it was sort of tied in together, but it also mentioned increasing the contracted out services for cleaning the beach. So is it possible to get some numbers around what, because it's sort of all tied in together, so maybe just a breakdown on what those numbers are? And don't need them right now, but just...
Any other requests for information that council has? If you don't have it right now, you can submit it directly to staff. So we don't have a closed session or a motion from closed session. So number 13 is the bylaw. So that the bylaw listed on the council budget agenda be read a first time, consider and passed. A bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its council budget meeting held on the 10th of January 2024. One reading with respect to confirming the proceedings of the meeting held on January 10th, 2024, that it be signed and executed by the chair and the deputy clerk. Can I have a councilor make that motion? Councilor McPherson, a seconder. Councilor Stevens, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, so having said that, the great motion of adjournment. Can I have a councilor make a motion that there be no further business, items of business, this meeting be adjourned? Councilor Miller is a specialist on this. So all in favor? Okay. Thank you.